impact their lives. As you all may be aware, adult individuals who are on social assistance do not receive dental benefits, but can receive emergency dental procedures. This benefit is issued for the relief of pain and suffering only. It includes x-rays, exams, fillings, extractions, and root canals on front teeth only. We heard stories of how individuals experienced excruciating pain due to tooth decay. They would book appointments with a dentist who would then assess the situation to confirm that it was indeed an emergency. The dentist would then need to contact social services to get approval to initiate the procedure. Oftentimes, the individual who was in a lot of pain would have to sit and wait for long periods of time while the dentist waited for that approval. In some cases, individuals were sent home because the dentist could not reach anyone to get that approval. It was in that moment of hearing these stories that our dental group was formed. We came together because we believe that dental care should be accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford it. We believe that all individuals should live with dignity and good health. Our first initiative was to work alongside social services to see if we could somehow make the approval process for emergency dental procedures easier. Supervisor Lori Wilson was a great support to our initiative. She met with our group, discussed our concerns, and agreed that changes should be made. I am proud to say that today, emergency dental services are now being implemented in a way that is easier for the dentist and more dignified for the individual. The dentist is given discretion to use professional codes and does not have to contact Ontario Works. Also, Ontario Works is waiving the 3-month waiting period for vision and emergency dental care. A person is immediately eligible as soon as they are approved to be on social assistance. Our next initiative is why I'm here today. We believe that every individual should have access to yearly dental cleanings as a preventative measure to poor oral health. We believe that no one should have to live in pain. No one should have to resort to losing teeth. No one should forget how to smile. We are not alone in this belief. In a short period of time, 3 hours to be exact, our group collected over 65 letters from the community members, agencies, and organizations that support our request for discretionary benefits for preventative dental care. And I have them on hand if anybody would like to look at them. On July 21st, 2016, our recommendation was brought to the Health and Social Services Advisory Committee and was approved. Now, you may be thinking that this is a provincial matter, and on this, we would all agree. We believe that everyone from all economic classes should have provincially funded dental care. This is why our group has recently started a Dental Care for All campaign, which was designed by the Social Planning Board of Toronto. We have 10 locations where boxes will be placed, and the public will be able to fill out a card asking the province of Ontario to cover dental care under the provincial healthcare system. And I have a box in the audience. There wasn't enough room for it put up, but if Tracy could hold it up, you can see what this box looks like. And that's for everyone to put in a ballot. Along with Dunnville, we will be encouraging other towns in Haldimand, as well as other municipalities, to create the same program so that a strong message will be sent to the Ontario government. I am sure you'll also agree that creating change at a provincial level is a long process. This is why our dental group will not wait for the province to provide dental coverage. Our group is continuing to work on strategies and solutions that could allow seniors, the working poor, the middle class to access more affordable dental care. For individuals on social assistance, we are asking Norfolk Council to provide funding for the inclusion of adult preventative dental care as a discretionary benefit. According to the Health and Social Services Committee, it is estimated that approximately 75% of those in receipt of Ontario Works would access a dental cleaning benefit if it were available. And therefore, the budget impact would be $63,096 total for both counties, which would be divided. We are aware that as it stands, Haldimand and Norfolk counties are mandated by the province of Ontario to implement certain social programs, that these programs are supposed to be 100% covered by the province, yet the municipalities are spending tens of thousands of dollars above the provincial funding in order to implement these programs. And here we are asking you to do more. To this, I would say our municipality spending on implemented social programs is not unique. In fact, many municipalities are faced with the same expenses and go even further to create programs and approaches that address poverty reduction. According to Mayors for Poverty Reduction, Mayor Walter Zenzik, City of St. Catharines, Mayor Jonathan Coate, City of New Westminster, Mayor Maxine Pedny-Jobin, City of Gatineau, are no longer willing to wait for the province of Ontario to step to the plate. These mayors have decided that if they want a healthy and productive community, then it's up to them to invest in that community. We ask the mayors of both counties to follow their lead. I can only speak from a Haldeman perspective when I say I see our mayor and council working to create economic growth in our communities, bringing new business and industries into Haldeman in order to create job opportunities, and investing in tourism would be two examples. Any industry or business that is sustainable for long term are those that come into communities not only for their own capital gain, but to invest in the community and provide opportunities. When these investors look at communities, they not only look at the economic sustainability, but also the health of the community. When they look at Haldeman, they see new bridges, fresh sidewalks, pretty lampposts, but will they see healthy community members? I researched 2 macroeconomic studies investing on health for economic development created by the Mexican Commission on Macroeconomics and Health Economic Growth and Poverty Reduction created by the World Health Organization and the director of the Center for International Development. These 2 reports show a strong correlation between the health of the community and its economic development. The first study mentioned states. In order to explain the relationship between health and economic growth, it is necessary to understand the concept of health in a broad sense. Health is not the absence of illness. It is also the ability of people to develop their potential during their entire lives. In that sense, health is an asset individuals possess, which has intrinsic value as well as instrumental value. In instrumental terms, health impacts economic growth in a number of ways. For example, it reduces production losses due to worker illness, it increases the productivity of adults as a result of better nutrition, and it lowers absenteeism rates and improves learning among school children. Health also allows for the use of natural resources that used to be totally or partially inaccessible due to illness. Finally, it permits the different use of financial resources that might normally be destined for the treatment of ill health. In summary, health affects economic growth directly. Through labor productivity and economic cost of illness, our councils can try to economically develop our communities, but if they don't invest in the health of the community, it's like riding a bike with no chain. We'll get there nowhere fast. If council invests in the health of the community, they're not just investing in healthy teeth, they're investing in their dignity, their self-esteem, their potential, their abilities, and their productiveness. When we speak about the economic cost of illness, what we are speaking about is that right now, social services is spending thousands of dollars a month to pay for crowns, teeth extractions, dentures, and partial plates. For example, a partial plate can cost anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 per individual. Other services such as crowns can cost $443 to $532 per individual. These procedures are costly but can be prevented with access to preventive dental care, and the costs that incurred by these procedures could then be allocated to other needs. I don't stand here naive enough to proclaim that the implementation of preventative dental care will solve everything. Poverty is a complex issue, but good health is a big piece of that puzzle. Our community collaboration is made up of strong and passionate individuals whose dedication to social change means that we aren't going anywhere. We are here for the long haul. If council decides to invest on a yearly basis in preventative dental care, this will allow us to work alongside the community to address other barriers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. No, that wasn't so bad, was it?
I'm still shaking, but I think I'm okay now. We'll see how the questions are like. Be kind. And I'll
Thank you very much. I'll ask if there are questions at this time for Nancy. Councillor Height, then Columbus.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to the deputation. You mentioned that there were some other mayors that support this initiative. Have they sent a letter to the Premier asking the province to kick in some cash?
That's a really good question, and that's something I haven't researched. I just know that they are implementing municipal level programs, but I can definitely look into that and get back to you if you like.
Okay, thank you. And now you mentioned you're behind affordable dental care for everyone. So does this include seniors on fixed incomes?
Yes, everybody. We want the province to step up to the plate and put dental care on the Ontario Health Plan. So that way that everybody, seniors, low income, middle class, upper class, everybody gets dental care.
The program in place, does that handle them now, or?
There is no program in place for those individuals. So what we are asking council is to implement preventive dental care for people on social assistance. And our group is working on strategies that will provide dental care for people who are low income or seniors in order to access affordable dental care.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Nancy, you did mention the working poor one time I noticed, but Right now, the those under social assistance get some dental care, right?
They get emergency dental
Right,
care.
emergency. But I know of individuals that are the working poor that don't get anything. Do you know
Yes.
what the percentage of our population is that are working poor rather than on social assistance?
I couldn't give you an exact number of the difference between people on social assistance and working poor. And we do realize that it is important. Like, we can't just have one economic group of people covered by dental care. That's why we are implementing programs to the province to tell them that these people need dental care also. And we're also going to look at possibly putting strategies of getting a dental chair in the hospital in Dunnville so that people who are low income could come in and get dental care through a dental hygienist. So we're looking at other ways to address that population. Unfortunately, the only other route for people on low income is through the province. But right now, the municipality does have the possibility of helping people on social assistance.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wells?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your deputation. And I guess, have you any idea what kind of costing we're looking at if this program were to be instituted? What, just in general, what we are looking at?
It's 63,000 if they say 75% of people in Ontario Works use it. We figure 75% because nothing's ever 100% utilized. So at 63,000, Haldeman's share would probably be 25 to 27,000, and then the difference for Norfolk, and that's because of the population differences in those on Ontario Works.
And that would cover what you were
One
asking?
whole year, and that's 1 year of preventative dental cleaning, which will then be offset by the cost of emergency dental care. So whatever we're paying out for dentures, crowns, it's not going to be a quick overturn, but through time, we'll see those costs reduced, and then hopefully in that meanwhile, the province will step up to play and take it over, the health care and dental care.
Province is never too keen to take over
I
these
know.
things. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first part of my question is the same as Councillor Wells's. So I think our line item, and Ms. Miranda will back me up here, I think is $34,400. That's the amount we're being asked to consider. Yeah, okay. But I do have another question for you, Nancy. Do you know at this point, have you made the same presentation to Haldeman County Council, first of all, and do you know if they have made their decision yet relative to this new initiative?
I am presenting to them on February 7th because that's when they meet. The reason why I'm here today is because I know that Norfolk has the deciding factor on how the monies get dispersed through health care. So here today and then February 7th for Haldeman.
Any further questions for Nancy? If not, a motion to receive as information, please. Councillor Columbus has moved. Discussion? Those in favor? That's carried. Nancy, I want to thank you for your deputation this morning, and as you're well aware, this item will be dealt with later when we get to Ontario Works and Social Services.
Thank you very
much. That concludes our deputations, and I would think that this would be an opportune time for our morning break of about 15 minutes. I will reconvene to get to the levy-supported operating budget at 10:25. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Tell them what Pete is. We're going to start anyhow. Okay, I'd like to get started on the levy-supported operating budget portion of our agenda, item 3. I'm going to start with a few comments, followed by the county manager, and then if there's any comments from council, and then we'll turn it over to John and Kathy for their presentation. So I'll start off by my few opening comments, and I will tell you I'm going to be very, very brief. As most of you know, I'm most anxious to get this binder open to page 4-1 and get busy. We have lots of work to do. I first want to thank County Manager, the Finance Department, the department heads and their staff members for the hours of work they put in preparing this budget for us, and I feel that our staff have done a very, very good job this year, as usual, in bringing this forward to us to deliberate on this week. This will be the third budget session for this particular council, so I believe that all of us know what is expected of us, and hopefully over the next 2 or 3 budget sessions this week, we will finish and be satisfied with the final result. Now, you've heard me say in the past, and I will repeat it again this year, that this budget proposal has been turned over to the 9 of us. It is in our hands, and we now officially own it and will be determining its outcome. It's up to us. And as you are also aware, the proposal before us shows that we would require an additional $3.9 million. That would be required to continue in 2017 in a business-as-usual fashion, with no particularly new services or growth added, for the most part, over last year's level of service. When education tax rates are factored in, along with new assessment growth from last year, et cetera, the starting point today is a proposed 3.9% increase in residential taxes. Last year in 2016, our final increase on the tax levy was 2.1%, and the year previous to that, 2015, the increase was 2.3%. So if my calculations are correct, for us to get into that range of 2% of a tax increase for this year, if that is the will of this council, it may not be, but if it was, then we would have to find overall reductions in this budget of approximately $1.4 million from the proposed $81,207,400 levy as presented on tab 1 of your budget binder, page 15 of 16. Those are my comments. Mr. Robichaud, I will certainly turn it over for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As council begins its deliberations of the 2017 tax-supported operating budget, I do appreciate the opportunity to provide some brief comments and background and context for the budget. By way of overview, the proposed budget results in an increase of 3.9%, or about $8 per month in the average residential tax bill, which would rise from about $2,591 to $2,691 in 2017. If you look at an overall increase of $100, about $20 of that would be for the second year of the phase-in of various impacts of transition items that Council decided last year should be transitioned into the budget, such as the new solid waste disposal system and leachate treatment costs. $10 would be for increases in requisitions of local boards and agencies such as police, libraries, and conservation authorities. $53 for increases in costs to operate the municipality in 2017 on the same basis as in 2016, and those are really driven by or arise from agreements and contracts that are already in place. For example, multi-year contracts we have with private sector companies for services such as collecting garbage and recyclables, and of course collective agreements with the 6 unions that represent a large number of Norfolk County employees. $10 would be for increases in so-called controllable budget adjustments. That would include, for example, things like winter control, materials, supplies, and contract services, increases in those items, and an allocation of $100,000 to the Community Improvement Program program incentives. That leaves about $7 for new budget initiatives. Most of those that you'll see in your budget document are ranked a 3 by SLT out of 1, 2, 3, or 4. And as council is aware, items that SLT ranks as a 4 don't get promoted to the budget and don't get submitted to you. And they are summarized, but they don't get promoted to the budget. All of this occurs against a backdrop where since 2012, Norfolk County has experienced a significant drop in annual provincial government unconditional grant funding. Our OMPF, the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, payments were at the level of $9.5 million per year in 2012, and that's fallen to about $6.1 million in 2017. So we've got a cumulative increase of some $3.4 million per year that's not in our budget as a revenue source. Even when you offset and factor in the provincial uploading of health and social services during that same period, we're still 2.5 million per annum behind. That's a significant drop in fiscal capacity. But despite that, during that same time period, budget restraint, cost savings, even though much of them have accrued to the benefit of the province and taking away that $2.5 million net, we've had fairly modest increases in the median residential tax bill. The average has been about 1.7% between 2012 and 2016, and in fact that's 1.8% in 2012, 0.8% in 2013, 1.4% in 2014, 2.3% in 2015, and 2.1% in 2016, as the mayor mentioned. Just by way of note, it is noteworthy that also during the past number of years, there's been restraint in terms of taking any of the kind of so-called inflationary increase in assessed values into our revenue stream, despite the fact that our real growth in property tax assessment has only been in the order of 1% per year. Property assessments have risen considerably over the life of Norfolk County. So when you factor in and look at tax rates on residential, the the tax rate on residential was about $1.01 per $100 of assessed value in 2001. It peaked at around $1.19 per $100 of assessed value in 2005. It had fallen to $1.09 in 2010, and it's back down to the level of $1.01 per $100 of assessment in 2015 and 2016. And the only reason I mention that is obviously, while we don't look at tax rates, we look at the tax levy and the average impact on the median or average or typical residential property. That does show that certainly, that I guess really significant and meaningful amounts of the phase-in of market value assessments on residential properties in Norfolk County has actually accrued to reducing the tax rate on residential properties. Just to wrap this up, Mr. Mayor, I did want to note that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario have really been looking at the crunch that municipalities are experiencing in Canada. We have a tremendous fiscal imbalance with the federal and provincial levels of government. In fact, if the 2012 Federation of Canadian Municipalities State of Cities and Communities report showed that there has been significant growth in government revenues during the past 50 years since the 1960s. However, 95% of that growth in government revenues has accrued, and that's from growth in the economy and growth in population, 95% of that has accrued to the federal and provincial governments in the form of sales, income, and corporate taxes. Interestingly, during the same 50-year period, there's been quite a shift in where public infrastructure falls. In the 1960s, about 38% of public infrastructure was at the local level, about 31% at the provincial level, and about 31% at the federal level. Today in Ontario, about 2/3 of all public infrastructure is at the local level, about 23% at the provincial level, and about 10% at the federal level. So here we are, municipalities now shoulder that, and that massive infrastructure reinvestment challenge, which you've seen in our capital budget process previously. And, essentially, we have that plus the tremendously wide array of service responsibilities municipalities have in Ontario, balanced against being relegated to the property tax system. So we have 21st century problems and challenges, and we're stuck with a 19th century revenue device, and we're shut out of the real revenue devices, sales, income, and corporate taxes that are really the revenue sources that reap the most benefit from population and growth in the economy. So with that, just say that with that fiscal imbalance, Norfolk County and other municipalities will continue to face that enormous pressure on property taxes in the face of infrastructure reinvestment requirements and providing such a wide range of services. And close by saying staff look forward to supporting the budget deliberations and informed decision-making by council. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. County Manager, for this summary. Now I'm going to turn it over to council for some opening remarks. I'm not going to get in any debate. I'm not going to allow that because we've got 3 days scheduled to do that. And other than anything that the county manager has stated here in his comments, or I have, I'm not going to entertain any questions other than what was just said. We have lots of time for questioning, and certainly when we get to our finance department in a few moments. So I'm certainly willing to open this up for any opening comments. Brief, keep them brief from council members. Mr. Wells, I'll certainly start with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, may I congratulate the county manager on his oration and his leadership with regard to the budget. And if I understood him correctly, for the last 2 years, the increase was 2.3% and 2.1% for the last 2 years. And that if we were looking at 2% for this year, if that were our goal, that we would have to cut the budget by $1.4 million to get to 2%. And did I get that correct?
The treasurer can confirm my calculations, but when I looked at going to 2.2%, which is sort of halfway between 2.1 and 2.3, to get from the 3.9 to the 2.2, the calculation I did on the $81 million levy was that we would have to chop 1.377 million, roughly 1.4. If I've made some errors in my math, I know that Mr. Ford will check those for me. Go ahead, sir.
I guess my question would be to the county manager, seeing as how the county manager is leaving, and I wondered if he would like to have a challenge, and if we passed a motion that said to you and your staff to get this budget down to reduce it by 1.4 million, you could do that in a couple of days, couldn't you? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I bet he could do it by noon.
Yeah.
We could recess till noon, and then staff could come back. Thank you. Any other general comments before we move on? I know there will be lots of comments. Councillor Black, go ahead.
Just a question on the education portion. Do we have that final number from the province?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, no, we have not. Their rates will probably come typically around about the middle to the end of February. So what we're doing is we've applied the average reduction in the education rate that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years to get an estimated education tax rate, and that's incorporated in what you see here in the budget.
So, and that's incorporated into your comments on the, how much was it? 3.9%?
Yeah, the 3.9%
Okay.
tax impact to
Yes.
the residential ratepayer, that is including
The
the
education.
estimated reduction in education taxes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's a number of adjustments coming up from that, going from that 5.6. You'll see it in the pages down to the 3.9, increased growth assessment, and yes, okay?
So it could come down, hopefully, maybe even a bit when we get the rate.
I wouldn't bank on it. The average reduction has been 4% over the last years, 3.9 to 4.01 in that range, so we've used 4. So I would feel pretty confident that 4 is going to be the number.
Any other comments? We're going to move on then, and on your desk is Mr. Ford and Kathy LaPlante's presentation. It's on your screen as well, or should be, and I'll turn it over to our finance department. Mr. Ford, please.
Kathy's actually going to do the presentation of the introductory comments, Mr. Mayor. As we've done for the last 2 or 3 years, we've been migrating to have Kathy deal with this presentation, and that way, if you have any criticism, it won't be leveled at me.
Yeah.
But I would comment that your suggestion of a $1.4 million number is in the ballpark.
It's in the ballpark, yeah, give or take a little bit.
So I'll turn things over to Kathy, and
Kathy, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Ford. Kathy, just before we start, would you entertain questions as we go through each page, or do you want to wait and go through it and then be entertained with questions?
We can entertain questions.
As we go through it?
Yep, throughout the slide presentation, yeah.
During the presentation? Okay, I think that's probably the best. And to council members, if I'm watching my sheet and you have a question, don't be afraid to interrupt me and say I have a question, okay? I'll try to keep my eye on both places. Go ahead, Kathy, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The presentation today, it's an overview, so it's at a summary level, and it'll be relatively just highlighting the information that's included in your budget document. You've seen a number of these slides in the past, and you've had, the information in your document, so I'll be going through it quickly, and as Mr. Mayor indicated, that if you have any questions during the slide presentation, please stop and ask me. I just want to let you also know that in your agenda package, if on this, right in the front sleeve of your binder, there is an agenda. Staff will be presenting their individual budgets, their detailed budgets throughout the next few days. They'll also, council will also have time to ask detailed questions from staff also relative to their budgets. Okay. The first slide is just basically a recap of the budgets. This is our third budget. Norfolk County for 2017 is deliberating. The first budget was the capital budget that council entertained. Yeah, it worked, sorry. Yeah. Just go back. Sorry about that. The first budget that we entertained was the capital budget. Council approved a budget of just over $28 million for replacement of tangible capital assets related to growth, and they also approved the funding options at that time for all of these projects. Last year, the capital budget was in the range of just over $32 million. The forecast up to 2026 that Council reviewed during October was a total of $303 million. And the next budget that we actually reviewed was the rate-supported operating budget, and it's the budget for the water and wastewater operating costs. Council approved that budget at just over $17.5 million in December. That set the water and sewer rates going forward for 2017. Now,
Sorry, Councillor Oliver, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry to interrupt so quickly, Kathy, but on that particular item that you've got there, the 17,533, in past years I wouldn't have made this comment, but I'm going to make it this year, and I'm looking at the second dark bullet there, funded totally from water and wastewater rates. Obviously, is that not an incorrect statement in that the general levy is now paying upwards of almost $2 million for fire protection as part of that 17,533?
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'll take that question. Yes, the fire and other services which are in this budget that we're looking at today do in fact pay a certain amount of monies towards into the water and wastewater budget. They're paying that not to support the day-to-day operations, but in exchange for the service that they receive from that group. They would pay that to anybody if our water and wastewater operation was outsourced completely, they would pay it to a third party. So the statement is correct. The water and wastewater is totally funded from water and wastewater rates. One of those rates happens to be the amount that we charge for fire protection, and another one is the rate that we charge for leachate and those kind of protections. So the statement's not wrong. You just have to look at it in context.
I understand that, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, John, for that response, but I still remain of the opinion that our general levy taxpayers are now today in 2017 and the previous year in 2016 paying a much larger percentage of the cost of supplying and distributing water than was ever the case in the previous 8 years that I've sat around this table. And that I think is something that has changed, and yet I don't see that reflected in that statement. So,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think, though, the charges for providing a water supply for fire protection are considered part of the rate structure of the water and wastewater. And so I guess in terms of, the blanket statement from water and wastewater rates is correct, but Councillor Oliver is correct in terms of the taxpayers are paying a portion of the cost of the water systems, and that relates to the costs of providing a water supply for fire protection. That's oversized mains, storage tanks, and other things that relate to fire protection.
Anything further, Councillor Oliver? No, I agree with you that certainly there's more than ever is being now supported for the uses that you outlined. Councillor Black, question?
Well, I look at that as the municipality overall is receiving a service. Isn't that the way it should be approached? They're receiving a service like anybody else. So a question, I guess, to Mr. Ford, is that not, we're receiving a service. And we never paid for it before, now we are.
Essentially, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. So it's not necessarily, I don't see it the same way, I mean, glass half empty, glass half full type thing here.
I think what Councillor Oliver is saying is of that 17,533,700, a portion of it, I don't want to say big, small, but roughly $2 million, Councillor Oliver, that $2 million of that 17,533 is not coming from the water and wastewater rates. It's coming from the tax levy, tax bill by all of the ratepayers.
As a service being provided.
I'm not arguing that it's not a service, but it's not coming, 2 million of that is not coming from the water bills that our ratepayers use. That's, yeah, so I'm not going to, I don't think we need to debate that, but I think that's the conclusion. Go ahead, Kathy, continue, please.
And we are now, today and over the next few days, going to be looking at the levy-supported operating budget, which for Norfolk County operations is approximately $148.8 million. It's for the actual operating costs for the day-to-day operations for levy-supported services provided. It's typically a one-year budget. You can have multi-year budgets, and that is one thing that staff will be looking to in the future, providing council with multi-year budgets. As we advance, hopefully in the next few years, we'll have those documents available. The budget is for the levy-supported operating budget is generally 1 year, and it covers all the department and division costs. It also includes administration, government costs, land use planning, leisure and recreation, includes the shared services between Haldeman and Norfolk counties for health and social services. There's funds in there to maintain infrastructure and provide some health and safety to our residents. The other item that our budget includes is financing for some capital infrastructure. It includes amortization costs, operating capital expenditures, capital funded for funds to fund capital projects that have no available reserves, and contributions to our reserve and reserve funds. It also incorporates the recently approved user fees that Council, I believe it was in November past, and of course, at the end of the day, that sets the tax rate for Norfolk County residents. The second area that's the levy-supported operating budget includes requisitions from boards and agencies, totals just over $15.8 million. The majority of that is the policing services. It's their request for operating and capital costs, and it also is included to set the tax rates for Norfolk County residents. One of the items that we wanted to bring up also, last year we attempted in our presentation to, what we did, we moved out long-term debt charges, transferred to reserves and reserve funds, and capital project funding. And we moved these items out of the department and divisions operating budgets as we felt they were more of a financing item as opposed to an operating item. And we placed these under a corporate finance area. That created some confusion last year, so we've changed it again this year, and hopefully it'll be much easier for council and for residents and staff to understand. We've taken these amounts, we've actually included them back into the department and divisions. However, we've consolidated it into one budget line called net financing. So it'll have all the charges to and from reserves and reserve funds and your debt financing, etc. The other item that we tried last year was interdepartmental charges. We tried the same thing and moved them out of the department's individual budgets, as generally these should balance down to zero. In our levy budget, it doesn't actually down to zero because we are charging water and wastewater, the Simcoe BIA, and the library board for some of our services that Norfolk County staff provide. Again, we've taken these, placed the interdepartmental charges and recoveries back into the department's budgets. However, you'll see that they're indicated by one consolidated line called net interdepartmental charges. And we're hoping then you could, when you're reviewing the individual department budgets, you'll see expenditures and revenues. Those are generally the expenditures and revenues for the day-to-day operations of the services that the department and division are providing. The next slide, beginning the budget process, staff provide SLT with a preliminary budget, and that begins our budget process. And the department staff review the services for the most cost-efficient service delivery. They review their base budgets, and they also include any changes in level of service and presents this preliminary budget to SLT. At that time, I believe it was early December, the levy increase was $84.6 million, or 10% levy impact, 7.5% of residential tax impact. Throughout SLT's review, you now have in your hands the proposed budget that SLT is presenting to council, and they've reduced it to $81.2 million for a net levy impact of 5.6 for a 3.9% tax rate impact.
Mr. Brunton?
Yeah, Kathy, that 3.9 you referred to, residential tax impact, that's based on what? Is that where we talk about the $200,000 home? Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I guess I appreciate that side of it, but there are a lot of commercial